The anchor point is that spot that doesn't move, so that we've got a steady, stable place upon which we can depend. We can rely on that spot. And he found the presence of God, the purpose of God, the protection of God, and the promises of God. That's all in Acts 27. Those 4 anchors are the things that we've got to hold on to.
Welcome back to the Rural Renewal Podcast. We're so glad that you are listening to us today. And we have a great small town story for you all today. This happened to us a couple weeks ago, I think it was, Chris.
Yeah, almost 3 weeks ago now. It's boy, time
Yeah.
flies, but yeah, pretty
So
recently.
Chris called me. I was at our daughter's softball game, and my dad was with me. And my dad, whenever he visits, he loves to do projects around our house. He rents. So one of those things he likes to do is he really enjoys mowing our lawn. So Chris had called me and he said, "Kathleen, did you move the lawnmower? Like, we have a riding lawnmower." And I was like, "No, we didn't. We didn't move it." And then he's like, "Well, I think maybe our lawnmower was stolen out of our garage." And I was like, "Oh, that's not good." And so we had to go through the whole thing. We called we don't have local police, so we had to call the state trooper. He came, took a report, um and then we had to tell everybody at church, because our church we live in a parsonage, so they have insurance on our property. So we were starting the process of, okay, what do we need to do for that? And I remember having this conversation with Chris. It was like a couple days after we discovered it, and we were like, yeah, it's like 98% sure that we won't get our lawnmower back, because it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. So, and then we were like gearing up for Sunday, like having that conversation with everybody at church, and they're processing while we're dealing with like the facts that it feels like someone took, someone did take something from us. And so dealing with that emotional thing. And, and then someone at church was upset about it. So she posted on Facebook. I mean, it was not a terrible post, but she was just like, if anybody has any information, let us know. And so we, so then, it, that all, we found out on Tuesday, and then on Friday morning, we got a message, and I'll let Chris tell the
Yeah, so I
second
was at we have a Friday morning Bible study, men's Bible study, that happens at 7:00 on Friday mornings, and we had finished up. Just as we were finishing up, I was talking to one of the guys from church about some building stuff. I was talking about building stuff going on, and my phone started like going crazy, but I was in a conversation, so I kind of ignored it. But then I looked down, and I've got like several messages from one person. Somebody else had tried to call. I'm like, oh, this is usually in ministry. That's not a good sign. But in this case, it was, because one of the messages were from a guy at our church who had worked at there's like a local store in town that sells lawn tractors. Actually, they sell bigger tractors too and things like that. But they and lots of that kind of equipment. They rent that kind of equipment as well. They also service it. And what had happened, they discovered, was they had sent out one of their younger employees to pick up a lawn tractor on our road to John Deere. We have a John Deere lawn tractor to be serviced. And when they went past our house, the garage, we have like barn doors for our garage. The barn door was open, and they saw the tractor, and they thought, that's got to be the one. And so they had loaded it, but it was not the one. They figured out that they had the wrong one when that person called on Friday and was like, "Are you going to pick up the tractor?" And they were like, "We did. It's right here." And they were like, "I'm looking at it as well, so you don't have the right tractor." And then through a little bit of conversation through the Facebook post, and the person who who messaged me, he doesn't work much there now, but has worked on and off at this place over the years. And then there's another person who works at the rental place that also has kind of family connection to the church. So between the two of them, they kind of put 2 and 2 together and said, "Oh." So lo and behold, the tractor was not stolen. The lawnmower was not stolen. So they serviced it for free. They did not charge us. They serviced it and returned the tractor. We have used the tractor since then. The lawn is mowed. So it was Just a very funny kind of story. And this local business, they're great. You can rent almost anything from them. But if you knew anything about the business, and they probably would say this, it's not shocking that it was their business that picked up the wrong tractor. Because as much as they're very much needed in our community, and they're very helpful, but also not always the most organized place. But yeah, anyways, it's kind of funny. So very funny. And help that a reminder that sometimes, I said this after the fact quite a bit, when we pray, sometimes God answers prayers in very funny, strange ways, right? Because we had prayed, I don't even know exactly how I was praying about this. Mostly it was, God, this is a frustrating experience. It feels a little weird. Somebody came into, our space and took something that, it's hard to not to feel a little, not great about some of your a neighbor or somebody who lives in your community who might have done that. So, I'm just trying to pray with God, kind of, help me to navigate, help us to navigate, help to figure out how we can get another lawn tractor, because it's May, and in Vermont, once it takes forever for things to start growing, but once they do, the grass it's growing. So, anywho, God answered that prayer in a very strange and interesting and kind of fun way. So, yeah, it was very funny and a fun rural story. So, and with a lovely ending. So those are nice
Yeah, for
sometimes.
sure.
So
Yeah, I'm really grateful that it had a happy ending and we didn't have to go out and buy a new one.
yeah.
Because that would have been
Or deal with
another.
insurance.
Yeah,
We were just about to reach out to insurance that day. We hadn't actually called them yet. We had, it meant and not that the state trooper we met with was a very nice gentleman, but we didn't have to go any further with them or anything like that. So that was good. It was really good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so we, talked with John Crowder, and if you remember, we talked to him last summer, early fall, somewhere
yeah,
around there.
somewhere in that range. Yeah. Yeah.
And we after we had set up the interview and everything, we found out that he had just released a new book.
Yeah,
Uh,
we talked to him the first time about some neat stuff that his church, he's the pastor of the First Baptist Church in West Texas, and they had some neat stuff that they were doing and that we had been made aware of, and we wanted to chat with him about that. But then we found out he wrote a book, and so we read the book, and it was really good. So the
yeah.
book is called Anchor Point. You're going to hear all about it. That's what the interview is about. But it's about in West Texas. There was a disaster in West Texas. He's going to talk to you about that and what he learned ministry wise about how to help a community and a church and things kind of navigate disaster response and mostly the disaster recovery. And rebuilding kind of thing. So that's what the interview is about. I think it's he's a great guy to talk to, and we really appreciated his time. Also, probably just want to talk a little bit about ways that we're trying to do some things with the Mustard Seed Initiative, which is partially the sponsor for the podcast, along with Fresh Expressions, and so just to kind of make you aware of some ways you can connect in if you've enjoyed the podcast or if you find it helpful and you want to connect in different ways. We're continuing to put together some workshops. We're hoping to have our next workshop sometime next month. Look for, if you're connected with us by email, look for an email that kind of lets you know the details on that. We're doing these new things called Mustard Seed Meetups, which are Zoom meetings. We're particularly if you're in pastoral leadership and you don't have a space, or even if you do have a space, but you're looking for another space where you can connect with others, mostly pastors, and talk about a little bit about what's going on and have other pastors pray for you as well. And we know lots of people have those, have settings where they get to do that. That's great. But if you're looking for something like that, if you need space like that, we're trying to make that available. So, we will be sending out an email for that. If you're not on our email list, reach out to the podcast with your email and we'll put you on the email list. So
Yeah, you can just email my my Ascent email address, which is kathleen.blackey@ascentmovement.org. And I can put you on the email list and let you know when we have things going on besides the podcast. And so yeah, keep an eye out on those things, and we're excited on what's going to come.
We'll put all that kind of stuff in the show notes so that if you need to see them. Also,
Yeah.
quick apology for our dog who seems to be barking in the background.
I mean, we have a great person who edits our podcast,
I'm
Joel.
sure
So
Joel's going to make
hopefully-
this sound amazing. So, but you may hear the dog. We apologize. His name is Maple because we live in Vermont.
All right. Well, let's move on to the interview.
Yeah, let's hear from John. Well, we're excited to have back on the podcast with us John Crowder, who's a pastor of a church in West Texas. We talked last fall, I think, sometime. We talked about some neat stuff that they were doing at his church. But in the midst of getting to know him, we actually found out something in our first conversations I didn't even know, which is that he had written a book called Anchor Point, which is about how his church and how he personally and his community responded to really quite a disaster that happened in their community. And so, John, if you want to just take a couple minutes, and I'm sure a few more people might have heard of it, but they may have forgotten over the years. It's been quite a while since the disaster. So you want to talk a little bit about what happened and in 2013, in April 2013 in West?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's good to be back with you guys. Yeah, I guess it's been 13 years now.
Wow.
2013. It was April 17, and that evening, a fire broke out at what we always call the fertilizer plant. It's not a plant. They don't manufacture anything. They just store the different, chemicals and things there. And farmer will come in and say, I need 80% of that and 10% of that and 10%, and then they mix it all up. So, but we call it the fertilizer plant. And fire broke out there about 7:30, and we were on our way back from a track meet about an hour away. My daughter had earned her way to the area track meet. That was kind of a big deal for us. And this is her senior year, so it's probably the last big event that she'd be in. So we were on our way back from that, and I got a phone call from my deacon. Actually, I saw on Facebook first that the fertilizer plant was on fire. And I didn't think anything about it, really, because we got a great volunteer fire department. They put out fires all the time. They'll handle it. Well, then about 20 minutes later is when I got that call from the deacon, and he said the plant exploded. And my first thought was, that's terrible. That's a big loss. Of somebody's going to lose their business. And he said a lot of people were injured, and he knew at that time he felt like there were a lot of people who had probably died. And I said, well, first thing, I mean, all I could think of was my wife is with me in the car. My daughter's on the school bus. We're okay.
Yep.
And then the other family member was our little dog at home, little white, fluffy, do nothing, worthless dog. And so she was my first thought. I'd say, well, we'll get home and take care of Princess, and then I'll see what I can do to help. Deacon called back in a little bit, about just maybe a couple of minutes after that. And he said, John, you don't understand. You don't have a home to go to, and you probably don't have a dog. And that's when it first kind of settled it into what we were dealing with. By the time we got back to town, it was pretty well, people pretty well understood what happened. The fire led to ammonium nitrate exploding. 28 to 34 tons of ammonium nitrate. You may remember the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. This was 12 times the amount of ammonium nitrate that took down that building. And in that explosion, we lost 15 people. 12 of them were first responders, were fighting that original fire. And that's how we lost them. They were right there at ground zero. And then 3 others in the community died that night. We lost 161 homes, completely destroyed. Another fourth of the town was damaged. And then about half the town was not directly affected, but multiply that into a bigger city and just think of
Yeah.
a fourth of a city gone in an instant, and then another fourth damaged. It was pretty rough. Um, so that's kind of just that's what we went through that night.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just putting people on buses and pickups and hauling them off to hospitals, and somewhere around 260, I think, injured that night. So it was bad.
Yeah.
It was a rough time.
Yeah. Yeah. I can only imagine. I think, anyone who pastors in a place for a long time will deal with one kind of crisis or another. That's a particularly, we will not all deal with a crisis like that. That's definitely something different. So obviously that kind of led to the writing of Anchor Point and a lot of other stuff that you talk about in the book. But one of the stories that kind of came out to me that I thought was you talked about several times, I feel like you made the same point several times, was that, you wanted to make sure you had a worship service
Yeah.
that Sunday. And now, because your building, if I remember from the book correctly, you were kind of like on the very edge of like the properties, and you could get in sort of from one side, but you weren't going to be able to hold worship there. It sounded like so. Why did you feel like that initially, and what would your advice be for someone who's going through like maybe where their facility is not usable or something like that?
Yeah, great. Yeah. The explosion happened on a Wednesday night. So Thursday, I'm getting phone calls. Are we going to have church on Sunday? Well, at first they didn't know what caused the explosion.
Yep.
And so the north part of town, almost half the town, not quite, but the north part of town was considered a crime zone, a crime scene, I guess you'd say. And so it was all cordoned off. We couldn't get there. Once they decided it wasn't a crime, they still kept us out so that they could do all the cleanup and investigations, and they didn't want all the looky-loos getting in the way, all that stuff. So
Yep.
my church was on the border of the boundary where you weren't allowed to go. Our parking lot is on the south side of Virginia Street, so we could have parked, but we couldn't have walked across the street to the north side of Virginia Street to get in the building.
Hmm.
So I told people as they were asking how we're going to do church, I said, we're going to have church. I just don't know how. Let me figure it out. So we spent a couple of days figuring out what to do. We wound up in a field on the south side of town, the opposite side from where everything was going on. And we got in touch with a party company in Waco, which is the next biggest town. And they brought out a bunch of folding chairs for us. One of my deacons set up a flatbed trailer for us to use, and another local church in Waco set us up a sound system. So the reason that we wanted to do that on Sunday, really, there were three reasons. One is we had been able, over those 3 or 4 days, we'd been able to email and call and kind of check in, but with all the chaos, we hadn't actually seen each other. And there's something about putting eyes on one another.
Mm-hmm.
You need that hug. You need that physical contact. And my people needed that. And so it was important for us to get together. But also, we've felt like the church is a family. And, you need your family at bad times. You go through crises, you need each other. And so that was the second reason that spoke to our need as a family. But I think really the top reason was this gave us a unique opportunity to demonstrate to our people and our community, God is always worthy of our worship.
Yeah.
If we worship him last week when everything was going great, well, he hasn't changed.
No.
So if he was worthy then, he's worthy now. my circumstances don't dictate his worth. And so it was a chance for us to talk about what is worship really, and what does praise look like. And so I tell you what, we met out there in the field, and God showed up, man. That hayfield, it became holy ground. And we had those folding chairs for pews and that flatbed trailer for an altar. And it was a meaningful time. Matter of fact, it's so meaningful that now every year on the Sunday after April 17, we go back to that same field and have our outdoor worship service again, so we can kind of bookmark and look back and see what all God's done, you know?
Yeah.
So
That's great. Yeah, we many of our listeners know that our church had a fire back in 2010. And the Sunday after, we had already been planning to do worship at a local park. We did it every summer because it had a little like pond, and we would do baptisms if there was someone who wanted. So we had this whole thing already planned, and we know that God was in all of that. That we had a plan for the first Sunday. But yeah, you like gathering together is so important after something so big that happens. And I would say there was more people than normal, but not terribly more. But I think it was really important for us to gather together.
yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even in our case, of course, it was just the church building that had been affected. So the night of the fire, so the fire happened like kind of in the middle of the night. So that by that evening, the evening after the fire, we gathered at the town, we got everybody together at the town hall, and we prayed and we sang, and and I remember your words in the book meant a lot to me, because I remember us kind of saying, it's God is still here. God knew this was gonna, none of this surprises God. He will get us through it. It's horrible what's got, all the stuff, but it just really probably brought that back to me. And I would say, worship. It's because God is worthy of our worship. Yeah. And he built us to do that. So, yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah.
Well, and one of the really cool God things that happened was that Chris, before the fire happened, he really felt like God laid it on his heart to do a sermon series on images of the church in the Bible. And over and over again, he said, the church is not the building, it's the people. And so many people said that after the fire, and so God was already preparing us for what was to come. And that was really, really helpful for everybody.
Yeah, he's got a way of doing that. We're shocked by these traumatic events, but God's not shocked. And so he's preparing the way before we even know we're on that path.
Yeah, for sure. So in the book, you emphasize the importance of leaders caring for themselves during a crisis. Why is self-awareness and self-care so critical for leaders, especially when they are personally affected by the same crisis as everyone else?
That is that's a question that I appreciate very much, because that's one of those lessons that I could only learn through experience. It's one of those. There are many truths in life that you think you believe it in your head, but then when life happens, there's that. I guess you could call it a test. Do you really believe this?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
I told you about the church, the worship service that we had in the field. After that was over, we left there and went to eat lunch. And while I was eating lunch after church that day, I realized that was the first time I had eaten anything since whatever snack I might have gotten at the track meet on Wednesday night. Um, and we weren't sleeping, we weren't eating. And it wasn't long till I realized that I was emotionally, spiritually, physically just drained, and I could not take care of my family, much less help my church or my community, um, because there wasn't enough of me that was present. Does that make sense? Um, and so I learned that even if you don't have an appetite go ahead and eat something. Even if you can't sleep, go ahead and lay down and rest. We've got to do what we can do, and it's not selfish. That was my biggest hurdle.
Mm,
Look around and I say, well, I didn't lose a loved one. These families
mm,
lost, they lost their son or their dad, and I didn't. And so it felt selfish for me to think about what I needed in all that mess. Um, and after I hit the wall, I realized it's not selfish. I care enough about my community that I need to do everything I can to be all that I can for them.
mm.
So
Yeah.
that's one of those lessons I'd rather not learn.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Some lessons, yeah. But we learned some of those. So it's funny because I know I can hear myself telling people when I meet with families after someone has just, after a family member has just died, oftentimes, or on a day of a funeral or something, and I'm talking to someone who's lost a spouse, and I will often say to them, you should eat something.
Yeah.
And to, you're right. Like, and why am I saying that? I know that they probably don't feel like eating. I wouldn't feel like eating if I was in their place. But like, yes, there's, it is still important to have, to do those basic things. And so why would we not take that kind of advice ourselves when we're going through something that's just that stressful and that hard?
Exactly. I think it was it Elijah, I think after that big showdown with the fire falling from heaven and the queen trying to kill him and all that stuff, and he goes out and sits under a tree and says, God, I'm done. Just take me.
Yeah.
Just let me go. And God said, no, here's what we're going to do. You're going to take a nap and then you're going to eat something.
Yep.
And I think there's some valid wisdom in that story for leaders.
Yep. Well, it's that we'll forget to do that kind of stuff when and we're built to do it. God knows we need it. He will provide it when we and remind us of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm grateful in our situation because we had only been pastoring for 6 months. It was our first church out of seminary, and we're still here. But we didn't know what we didn't know. And so there's a lot of pastors who definitely came alongside us and walked through it with us, which I'm grateful for because, the day of, pastors were just showing up and helping us. And one pastor in the area, she just brought a pizza to our house and we ate pizza.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, it was important to have those people in our lives.
Yeah. I don't know what we'd do without each other.
It's like God wanted us to be together. So one of the things that I took in terms of learning things, you talk a lot about the difference, and if you want to just kind of go through a little bit about the difference between rescue, relief, and recovery, and how knowing just those phrases can help you put in framework if you're in one of these situations. So,
yeah, thanks, Chris. I really think that what you're touching on right there is probably the most important lesson about disaster recovery, because it's the thing that confuses the most people and causes the most conflict. Every time there's a disaster, you'll hear people saying, well, all this money was donated. Why isn't it getting to the people? That's a valid question, but there's also a valid answer. You'll also, we also get calls after disasters. Now, people will call me and they'll say, from your experience, should we give money to like a local church, a local entity, or should we give it to the big funds that were set up by the banks or a big foundation? There's always those two options, and they say, which one should we do? The answer to the question, should I give to local churches or the foundations, is yes. You give to both because they serve different purposes. The reason that we don't understand all this money was donated to this foundation, why aren't the people getting it? is because that money serves a different purpose. So here's how it breaks down. There are 3 phases to disaster recovery. The first one is rescue. Rescue is, think of it in terms of hours, usually, sometimes days, but usually hours. That is, we're going to go in and we're going to find all the people that we can rescue. We're going to recover those that we can't. And we're going to stop the fire or whatever's going on. As you can imagine, hurricanes in Texas they come in, they stay for hours. So all of these apply in different ways, but the basic concept is rescue is just getting everything settled. This is the first responders who come in and react. Then you move into relief, disaster relief. This is where usually the volunteers show up. The On Mission Network is doing amazing work throughout the U.S. In disaster relief, and they'll show up. They make sure people have food, clothing, shelter. They meet the immediate needs so that people can figure out where they're going next and how to get everything put back in order. In this phase, you think of it in terms of weeks or months. Then the last phase is the recovery phase. This one you think of in terms of at least months, but probably years. This is the long term. This is how you wind up paying for the house that you lost. You wind up paying your medical bills. You get the counseling that you need. You see the community begins to put back the infrastructure, all that stuff. So here's why we fight over money. Somebody gives money to that big foundation and they say, how come nobody's getting it? Well, when you give to the big bank or the foundation, you're investing in the recovery phase. That's going to happen for years later. If you want to immediately give money to put people, put food on people's plate today, you give to the local organizations like local charities or churches so that they can be a part of the relief phase. Where it hurts us, Chris, is, I say hurt, where it's a challenge is all of us want to give to relief. Financial needs are far greater in recovery. So if it's important to you to give to relief, do that. Give it to the local church, but back that up with some kind of investment in the bigger funds that are going to help in long-term recovery. So I think if we could understand how that works, it helps the donors understand how and when to donate. It helps volunteers understand how to deal with things. Just an example, when we lost our house, one of the big churches in Texas contacted me and said, we want to make you whole. We want to pay for everything you need to recover from your lost house, which was awesome. And it was beautiful and it meant so much. But they kept asking for a number. Well, they could write the check. Well, I don't know the number. I'm living in relief. I'm living day to day. We moved 4 times in 6 weeks. We were living out of Walmart bags. I don't have a clue how to build a house or what it's going to cost. And they eventually got tired of waiting because their people, I understand, their people were asking what's going on with that money we donated. And so instead of helping us get everything paid off, they sent us some very generous gift cards that we were able to use to get food and clothes and stuff we needed right then. But all that to say, they were meeting a recovery problem while I was still dealing with a relief problem.
Yep.
That makes sense?
Oh yeah. We've had a couple. We live in a town with a river, so there's flooding here and there. And there was flooding way back in I think it was 2011, which didn't affect a huge portion of town, but I definitely remember that kind of thing. They were still FEMA was doing. They did some buyouts of flood properties, and I believe it was almost 10 years before the last of those were. I mean, people had mostly moved on, but before the town manager who was kind of dealing with the last little bits of paperwork, and then the buildings were actually taken down because that's a FEMA flood thing. But so yeah, it can take a long time in that recovery phase.
It does.
Yeah.
And now you mentioned FEMA, and they have a relatively new practice that does confuse some. Now, it wasn't always this way. Now they can come in and give families money immediately.
Mm.
But you'll hear on the media, each family only got $750. Well, that's because FEMA was meeting relief needs. Now, FEMA is also going to stay and help with recovery needs later. That's the media didn't understand there were two phases, and FEMA was trying to be a part of both phases.
Yeah, and it's definitely very different dealing with that phase right after things happen than and even the rescue part, which is obviously often, I think, as churches, we're not mostly, that's mostly a first responder kind of thing. But then, the two phases as a church, you deal, often I think churches kind of thrive, and at least in my experience with people I've known who've gone through these kinds of things, thrive in that kind of recovery phase because there's often a lot of volunteers around. We have lots of, we have a facility we can help them with. We know the people in community, all the kind of stuff that can be helpful. And the recovery, hopefully you have a couple people who are gifted in the kind of paperworky and or who can get involved in that, because it is often and you talk a little bit about this in the book too. That part is tedious. It's important. It's obvious that's how people get back to wholeness, but it is tedious and long.
It is.
And
yes, it takes a long time to get all the way through that third phase.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Yeah. And I was, you talk about the emotional responses through time. And I know for us, the 1 year mark, we decided so our building was 176 years old, but our church was 199 years old. And so the next year we celebrated our 200th anniversary. And so it was in February.
Up there, that's crazy.
We've been a lot. We're not even that old for a New England church, but yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kathleen.
No.
That's totally fine. Yeah, I forget that's weird. So our anniversary is technically in February, but who wants to celebrate in February? It's just really cold. So I was like, the 100th anniversary, they did like a week-long celebration. And so I was like, oh, we should do that again. So we did it in August, and we did it the 1 year anniversary of the fire, because what do you like, there's only so much you can do. And so we did this whole theme. It was Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so we had this theme of like the history of our church, where we're at now, and then the future. And in the middle of the week was the anniversary. And we gathered, where our church was, there's just a big hole. And so we called it the Holy Hole. And so we gathered there, and, we had some, remembrances and stuff like that. It wasn't anything too, but as time went on, we found that there was less mourning and more people were just kind of ready for the next thing. They don't want to stay in that sadness. And I mean, they did really grieve the loss of the building, but after a while you get kind of like, okay, well, we want the new building now, So can you talk about your experiences with the natural change and emotional response that people have in a crisis over time?
Yeah. There's a lot smarter people than I am who have actually studied this and put together a graph. And when I found that graph, I looked at our experience, and it fits it to a T. And since then, over the last decade, I've worked with other communities as they go through disaster relief. I've been able to kind of walk some of the pastors through some of these things. And so I've paid attention, and I've seen this in every situation. It looks different, but the graph still holds true. And here's how that works. So just speaking about the community's emotional well-being. It's not talking about finances or how we get along, but just their emotional well-being. You start off kind of where you are right now, the status quo. Then, if you're lucky enough, like in a tornado or a hurricane, you get warning. We didn't get any warning, but if you get warning, there's a dip in that emotional thing because of fear, and then the disaster actually happens, the bad whatever the trauma is, and you see that emotional response go down very quickly, as you would expect. Well, then this kind of the surprising thing happens, and that is in the days that follow the trauma, uh, that emotional response rises and it goes even higher than it used to be. The reason for that is we look around and we say, look how we've all come together as neighbors. Look how we take care of each other. Look at all these volunteers who are showing up because they're helping us. They care about us. We were on the national news because people want to know how to help us, and it's all encouraging. Uh, if you think through some of the different disasters, uh, perhaps one example that might be more familiar where you guys are, you'll remember the phrase after the Boston bombing was Boston strong. Well,
Mhm.
that phrase has been picked up. I don't know who started, if it was Boston first, I don't know, but whoever started it, that's been picked up by communities all over, and they'll say West strong, Waco strong, whatever. That is kind of that rallying cry that happens as you're on this emotional climb. The hard part about that is that emotional ascent or climb doesn't last very long. There are a few days there where, look at all this, man, everybody's taking care of us. We're going to make it. We love each other. And then almost immediately there's a huge decline, and it goes very, very deep, very, very quickly. And then once you kind of hit that rock bottom, you turn a corner and you start a very slow, very long, if I can get this on the little video thing there, very slow and very long, uh, process to come back. Along that process of coming back, and remember, we're just talking about emotions, but on that long process of coming back, there are certain triggers. Um, there's the first anniversary is tough, especially if there was a lot of loss of life. People remember the day that their loved one died. They remember the date.
Mhm.
Uh, and so that's a big one. Um, for us, it was every once in a while we would get bad news from FEMA. Uh,
Mm.
the FBI was doing some investigations, and they basically said, "We'll never know what caused the fire." And that was a bad trigger for us. So there are those downs and ups, but as those ups and downs go, over time, you are climbing. And then eventually, when you get through this thing, something amazing has happened because you started here at the status quo before it all happened. And at the end, emotionally, your community is just a little bit better off because of the
Mm.
experience. You
Mhm.
always hear some senator or governor, some mayor say, "We're gonna come back and we'll be stronger than ever." Well, it's politics, but it's actually true.
Mm.
You communities do come back a little stronger than they were before it all happened. If we can kinda learn how that works, it makes it a lot easier to live through it personally, but also to understand the people we're leading, to help them see what's going on and kinda know how to help them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just having some expectation and some, for me, I was when I was reading that, it really hit home to some of the experiences we had with people over the years, and I thought, this, uh, I it it wouldn't I don't think it doesn't change things to know what's gonna happen necessarily, but it does help you navigate them, and to be the kind of voice people need to hear, pastorally in those instances too. I think that was, in the book you talk quite a bit about, being being hope in those places where people's emotions started to really, to continue to find ways to proclaim that, we're still hopeful people. We have a God who has good things in store for us. And I think, knowing when people need to hear that specifically, I think is really helpful.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Towards the end of the book, you talk about you met a gentleman who gave you these two phrases, or maybe he just gave you the first phrase, but then you added a second one to it about some of the stuff that came at you. And I think, for any of us who are in a leadership position, when something like this happens in our community, at some point, people are going to complain. They're going to have things, both because they're emotional. Maybe they have a point at times, but or maybe they don't. Who knows? But people are going to have things that they're going to say that are going to kind of come against you a little bit. And you came up with this phrase, fog it and then filter it, as the second part of that. And so you just talk a little bit about how that helped you deal with some of that, some of those things as people had questions and maybe thoughts and just, weren't always, as those emotions kind of came, they weren't always as hopeful in the way they responded to you and things they said to you. Yeah. So
Yeah, it was pretty rough for a while. I wound up on the board that was responsible for distributing the big funds, the recovery funds, and understandably, people are frustrated. They need their money. They say, "Well, I got this much, he got that much. How come this?" And there's all these things that are going on. So I call it my disaster after the disaster.
Mm.
The disaster obviously was terrible. Then I had my own little personal disaster where I couldn't sleep. They were hounding us on the news every night. They were beating us up on Facebook in the mornings. It was harsh. And I was going through a rough time, and Ben Younger showed up. And Ben was a unique guy, had big bushy beard, quiet, kind of soft-spoken guy. And I had never met him before, so here comes this guy in big bushy beard. He's gonna start talking to me. He kinda talks soft, and I'm thinking, "What are you doing?" Before long, we wound up being friends, and he came by the office, and I was telling him what I was going through, and he said, "Fog it." I said, "What did you say? This is a church." Well, what oh, he said, "Fog it." I said, What is that?" So he explained it so beautifully. He said, "If we're rigid like a pane of glass, and that complainer, that angry person, they're throwing rocks at us. Well, if we're rigid like a pane of glass, we're just gonna shatter when they do that. But if we can be more like fog, they throw those rocks at us, the rocks just go right on through, and we keep doing our thing." And I thought, "Man, that is what I need to learn. That's what figure out how to do that." And so I really worked on that for a long time, and I came up with kind of a filter where you ask 2 questions. Are they right? And are they being reasonable? If they are right, what they're complaining about is correct, and they're handling it in a reasonable way, I need to receive that. If they're right, but they're not being reasonable, they're being a jerk, then I need to consider that. If they're not right, but they are being reasonable, then I need to explain it. If they're not right and they're not reasonable, fog it.
Reading that chapter, I was like, this. I mean, yes, in a crisis, this is good advice for ministry, I think, in general as well, or maybe just life, right? Where people,
Life.
It's good. And I really
Walmart,
yeah, exactly. It really, very. I just like, oh, this is very helpful in terms of thinking about, and I like starting to be able to navigate through, when are people saying things I need to hear because they're right, and they're saying, and they're, but also what to do when it's just not true and not reasonable. And it was really, I just found it both amusing and also really true to life and important. So I really appreciated that chapter
Good.
particularly
Good.
in
Thank
the
you.
book. So
Appreciate that.
as we kind of finish up, we don't take too much time here, but as we finish up, here's my little piece of advice: read. This is the kind of book. Yes, you're not gonna have time to read it when something crazy happens. Read it, and you don't have to take a lot of notes on it. This is not a read it and it's going to you have to be just read it and have it in the back of your head. You'll have a couple things that you'll remember about it, somewhere to go back to when inevitably something we face this kind of thing in ministry. Because if you stick around in ministry, and I think particularly why it was helpful for a rural perspective for me is West is a small town.
Yeah.
And you talk a little bit about this when you for people who haven't read the book yet. There's a chapter that kind of thinks a little bit about what happened in West, which happened the same week as the Boston Marathon bombing, which was obviously happened in Boston, a very different place. And in a city, there's more infrastructure to kind of deal with something like that. Doesn't mean that it can't be terrible in a city too.
Sure.
But and there were very different kinds of disasters, obviously. But a lot of people that we connect with are gonna hear this happened in a town where 100 and something homes or buildings were in. That was a quarter of the town were destroyed, right? And you're like, okay, well, it's not a very big town, but that's like my town. So it did really kind of help. It's worth a read though, because inevitably something will happen. And hopefully not on the scale for most of us of what happened in West, but there will be a flood or a tornado or, a fire or you name it, something will happen, and the church will have a role to play in their community and it will be a space where the church has voice and can give evidence to the gospel in ways that
Yes.
we only get those opportunities sometimes in those spaces.
Right.
So
Yeah.
beyond that, if a pastor listening to the interview were to face something significant in their church, a crisis in their church community tomorrow, what's the first thing you think that they should remember?
I think the first thing is probably what we talked about a little earlier. This surprised you. It did not surprise God. He saw this coming. He's got you in this spot at this time, knowing this was going to happen. The phrase from Esther that for such a time as this. That's it.
Yes.
For such a time as this.
Yeah.
That's not just an Esther thing. God thing. That's how he works.
Yeah.
And so a leader is not going to feel adequately prepared for something like this.
Yep.
Not going to feel like you're competent. Don't get down on yourself because of that. That just means you're a normal person instead of some kind of superhuman freak. You're just a normal person. But remember that God saw it coming, and he's already begun working. So we can trust him. God put us here for this time for a reason. And I'm convinced that he's got it all together. In the book, we real quick address anchors that I think it's in the introduction that Paul learns that he's got certain anchors that he can hold on to. And that's kind of the idea behind the title, Anchor Point. The anchor point is that spot that doesn't move, so that we've got a steady, stable place upon which we can depend. We can rely on that spot. And he found the presence of God, the purpose of God, protection of God, and the promises of God. That's all in Acts 27. Those 4 anchors are the things that we've got to hold on to. And God puts those in place before the bad thing happens. So when it does, we look back and say, oh, look, I've got these anchor points that I can hold on to.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's a great place to finish up. But yeah, thank you so much, John, for sharing with us again, for coming back on the podcast. Like I said, I think this is it is well worth the read. You'll when you need it, you'll to have had kind of just read through some of this, know the information. There's not a lot of books, like you said. This we were talking about this a little before. From a ministry perspective, there's just I hadn't ever come across anything that was kind of written in this like this before. So I thought it was really helpful for something that almost anyone in ministry over the long haul will deal with some variation of this. So
some degree or another. And that's the irony of the book. Who wants to read about bad stuff like disasters?
Yeah.
Up and read it until you need it. But when you need it, you don't have time to read it.
Yep. No, exactly. Yeah. No. But it is I would say the first couple chapters as you walk through what happened to you and your family, definitely a few tears, which is, you do a great job of kind of helping us get to the point of, yep, this really over the top, crazy, hard, terrible thing happened. But for the most part, the book is very uplifting, which you wouldn't necessarily think of for a book like that, and it was, I really appreciated it. So I would suggest that it's worth the read and keep it on the bookshelf because should the next event happen, the crisis event, you're going to want to go back here and find the graph and look and say, where are we? Or remember, what am I supposed to do with how do I forget? What am I supposed to, filter? Where those filter words go through? So there's some really helpful stuff there. So
later this summer, we're supposed to release a workbook that is intended for like church staffs or disaster relief volunteer groups to sit down and work through Anchor Point book through this workbook. So hopefully there'll be a chance to do a little training with your other leaders before you ever need all this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's also a great idea because it will end up being the leadership in a church. That certainly is true here. People and seeing it on this end, looking back at their emotional responses people sometimes had over time makes a lot more sense, and giving them some of those tools would have been really helpful too. So that's great. That's really good. So,
well, thanks, Chris and Kathleen. I appreciate y'all letting me come back and visit with you again and talk about the book. Your encouragement has been very meaningful. Thank you.
Well, good. We're glad, and thanks for giving us the time.
All right.
Rural Renewal Podcast is brought to you by Fresh Expressions and the Ascent Movement. Fresh Expressions is a worldwide movement of everyday missionaries who want to see churches thrive in places we eat, live, work, and play by leveraging the creativity and endurance of the inherited church. The mission of the Ascent Movement is to create a thriving, collaborative connection for the church to live out the Great Commission in today's context. One of the initiatives of the movement is the Mustard Seed Initiative. Inspired by the message in the parable of the mustard seed, the Mustard Seed Initiative seeks to empower small churches across North America, enabling them to grow in faith and impact within their communities.
To connect with this podcast, you can email us at podcasts@freshexpressions.com. Rural Renewal Podcast is hosted by Kathleen Blackey and Chris Blackey. It's edited by Joel Limbowen and produced by Kathleen Blackey and Jeanette Statz. Our senior director is Shannon Kaiser. A special thank you to Brad and Joni Perry of Alabaster Grace for the use of their music for our podcast.
If you have learned something or been encouraged by this podcast, please help us spread the word. You can give us a review on Apple Music or Spotify and share this episode on social media.
May God be merciful and bless us. May his face smile with favor on us. May your ways be known throughout the earth, your saving power among people everywhere. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. Let the whole world sing for joy because you govern the nations with justice and guide the people of the whole world. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. Then the earth will yield its harvest, and God, our God, will richly bless us. Yes, God will bless us, and people all over the world
will fear him. Psalm 67.